Hey guys, today we're going to cover a weird geography standard. Part of the standard is that you guys can identify cities, their organization, their layout. So we're going to be talking about natural cities and artificial cities. You might remember at the beginning of the year we talked about how the first towns were made. Some hunter-gatherers, they found like a river or someplace. They built a house, a few more people built houses, and eventually that little village grew to be a town, the town grew to be a city, and so forth. Well, every city in the world today can be classified as either an artificial city or a natural city. So let's look at what those are. We'll start with the natural city. So like we said before, someone comes along, builds a house. And then a little while later, maybe a few other people join them. And they build their houses wherever. Wherever's the most convenient for them. And then those people start having kids. Kids build houses wherever. Before you know it, this small village turns into a small town, turns into a city. So we got our city here. This is kind of how natural cities are. The city grows around the people. And the problem comes when they start building roads. Roads are how we figure out if something's a natural city or an artificial city. Makes it really easy. When people were building their houses anywhere, it was a lot harder to go in later and put in roads. So you'll see some roads start off all nice and straight. Other roads can't because they keep running into houses. So what they end up doing is building some very strange roads. Roads that aren't perfectly straight, or roads that get interrupted by houses. We end up with these kind of weird blocks. This is what a natural city is. It's a city that's built around the people. You'll have roads that start going east and then all of a sudden go south. Things like that. If a natural city is a city that's built around the people who are already there, then an artificial city must be about the opposite. With an artificial city, what they'll do is they'll plan out the city. A lot of times, what this looks like is this nice grid pattern. City blocks that are about the same size, perfectly straight roads. That's kind of the plan. And then what happens is, once they've built the city, they built the neighborhoods, the streets, houses start moving in. Before you know it, the whole place is full. So this is what an artificial city is. It's planned out ahead of time. Parks, houses, businesses, pretty much everything is mapped out, at least as far as the space goes. They maybe don't know who's going to live in this house, but they know this block is for houses. Here's some map examples of a natural city and an artificial city. On the left, we got a natural city. The white lines here, these are the roads. If you look at the roads, one of the things you'll notice is that the blocks are not the same size. You'll probably also notice that the lines are not straight. And if you look at some of these roads, you start going north, and then you end up going east. Some of these roads are perfect circles. Some blocks are very long. Some blocks are very short. Makes driving around very difficult, but it's very easy to figure out which city's natural and artificial just based on the roads. This is actually a map of London. Artificial cities, like the one on the right here, this is a map of New York. If you look, the blocks are almost all the same length, same width. The roads are mostly perfectly straight, with the exception of Broadway here. Because someone took New York, back when it was a farm, and they knew they were going to build a big city, so they sat down and designed out the whole thing. This is a very good example of an artificial city. Now sometimes an artificial city won't be in that perfect grid pattern like you saw before, but it's still easy to identify because of the perfectly straight roads. Very rarely you'll find some artificial cities that are on what they call a wheel and spoke pattern, because they're shaped kind of like a bicycle wheel. You got your centerpiece here, and then the bike spokes coming out, and then kind of a bigger circle going around on the outside. So this is kind of a weird example of an artificial city. Alright, so quick review. Two types of cities: natural city, artificial city. Natural cities are built around the people, and they're easy to identify because of the crazy roads. Artificial cities are planned and organized ahead of time. They're easy to figure out because of the roads. We looked at these two examples. And the weird example. Some positives and negatives for each. Natural cities, people usually know each other. They tend to know most of their neighbors, at least in the area where they live. There tend to be support systems available. What I mean by that is if you need a babysitter, you know your neighbors. You're probably related to a lot of your neighbors. So it's easier to get help with babysitting. It's easier to get help if you need money help or food help or help doing work, things like that. Because you know most of your neighbors and related to a lot of them, there tends to be a lot less crime. Now there are a lot of good things about artificial cities too. Tend to have better technology. They tend to be organized better. It's easier for emergency vehicles to get around. It's easier for tourists and other groups to get around as well. And artificial cities tend to be more global in their perspective because your neighbor, you might have one from Las Vegas, another one from Chile, another one from China, another one from Alaska. Now, as far as the negatives for natural city, it's going to be a lot of the same positives from the artificial city. Natural cities, they're not very good for organization. And this is going to lead to problems for emergency vehicles, for tourists. It's a lot harder to get around. And it's a lot harder to put in things like parks and new schools and things like that. Technology also tends to be not as good because the city is built around the houses that are already there. In a lot of really old natural cities, the houses were built before electricity, before plumbing, before internet, before a lot of technology. So you'll have a lot of problems with those technologies because it's always harder to add something later. Other emergencies, if a fire truck has a hard time getting to the house, there's going to be problems. As far as the negatives for artificial city, there's a lot less for your support systems. There tends to be a lot more crime, and the people end up being usually more isolated from their neighbors. You might say hi to your neighbor, you might know their name, you might be friendly with them, but it's not someone that you'd feel comfortable asking to babysit usually. We're going to look at a few examples here. All right, just for the heck of it, take a look at Cairo, Egypt. We'll see if we can identify if this is artificial or natural. You always have to move away from the river to check, because the rivers are always going to mess things up. So as I zoom in here, first thing I do is identify a big road. Then I look, we've got a road here that's a half circle. Another one that's, looks like it's a half circle that kind of stops. But on this side, we got squares. It's kind of hard to tell where a lot of the roads are, too. Here we've got a block that's triangle shaped. So when we got crazy roads, that means it's a natural city. So here's Las Vegas. As I start to zoom in, I'm already seeing a lot of squares. I see all sorts of big squares. As I zoom in, I see the big square is made up of other smaller squares. And if I zoom in some more, there's even smaller squares inside the other smaller squares. Nice straight roads. Nice squares. Artificial city. In fact, pretty much nobody lived out here and someone decided to build a city in the desert. Now some good practice is to open up Google Earth, type in any city you want anywhere in the world, zoom in like I did, look at the roads, and see if you can guess whether it's an artificial or a natural city.